The fantasy football season may be over, but you gotta be kidding yourself if you thought these videos were gonna come to an end anytime soon on this channel. In this video today, I'm going to be discussing and going over what kind of running back research I came up with in the offseason and discussing how much of that RB research and analytics actually followed through into the 2024 season. And based off of those numbers, what we can identify as good draft picks for running backs next year and players that we should be targeting in our 2025 drafts. I know it's very early and it's a little too early to make these jumps and conclusions of, draft player A over draft player B, but given the information and statistics that I have for you, the viewers, we can come up with an idea of which running backs are better picks in the middle to later rounds versus some of the other players. For example, maybe you thought Zamir White or even Ramondre Stevenson would bounce back and have strong 2024 seasons, but my information and my analytics would tell you otherwise. So before we get into that, let's roll the intro. So in front of us here, I have a list of in 2024 from weeks 1 to 17, granted, we don't play fantasy football, most of us, in week 18. Our championships end in week 17. This is the top 25 during the fantasy regular season. PPR, the top 25 finishes. Now, obviously, there are plenty of names that you recognize, but what you may or may not realize is that anywhere in a given year, this can go back to as much as 2021 to now. Around 10 to 15 of these players are usually in their fifth season or have 5 years in the league or more. So if we go through the list right now, Saquon Barkley obviously has more than 5 years in the NFL. Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson are both year 2 guys, so they don't count. Derrick Henry, another year 2 guy in Devon Achane. So last year's rookie class absolutely smashed. Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Rico Dowdle. Even though he's only played 4 seasons, he was part of the 2020 class. So he does classify as someone who has 5 years or more in the NFL. And J.K. Dobbins. So that's 13 guys right there that have year 5 or more and finished in the top 25 this year. In terms of players that carry over from last year's top 25 to this year's top 25, 16 of these players were top 25 last year. So if we just go through and identify who didn't make the cut last year, pretty sure Najee Harris was one of them. Chase Brown was definitely one of them. Chuba Hubbard was not top 25 last year. Bucky Irving, obviously, because he's a rookie, was not top 25 last year. James Conner was actually not top 25 last year. So that's another one. So out of the top 25 that carries over, 16 carried over this year into top 25 status. So what we know is that for the most part, unfortunately, there's going to be the Travis Etiennes of the world and such that don't carry over. Even Isaiah Pacheco, unfortunately, due to injury, is another one. These players don't necessarily always carry over, but a strong amount of them will carry over into another top 25 season. So now, what does this mean? Because, of course, you can draft somebody who finishes as RB2 and finishes as RB22 the next year. And that's not what you drafted your first round pick or your second round pick to be, a back end or front end RB2. When you're going through and trying to identify who you want to take in the middle rounds of your drafts in 2025, I get it, it's early. We don't really know exactly what's going on. Keep this in mind. When you're going through the middle of your drafts and you're looking for that second running back, you're looking for that third running back to boost up your RB depth in the draft. Look for guys that people aren't that high on who have the experience of finishing in the top 25 because they have that veteran kind of trait to them where they have 5 or more seasons in the NFL. So now this year, you're going to be looking for the guys that were rookies in 2021. You're going to be looking for the 2021 rookie draft class. This year, I was focusing more so on players that were from the 2020 class. So that would be Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins. Rico Dowdle was obviously one of them. I wasn't really drafting Rico Dowdle, I'm not going to lie. But the analytics prove that because he's 5 years or more into the league, he has a higher chance of finishing in that top 25 than some of these other younger players. For example, I know a lot of people were not that excited in the offseason to draft Aaron Jones as one of their running backs. He ended up being the 14th best running back in PPR. Why? Because he went to a new team, had a great situation, was the bell cow, this, that, and the third. I get all of that. But if you were looking at him versus some of the other guys going near that area, like Zamir White, like any of these guys that were not year 5 or later, you could have potentially saved yourself by grabbing a guy who's older, even though, yes, you're supposed to draft younger running backs. That's always what we've been taught. Running backs don't have a lot of shelf life. Running backs don't have long careers most of the time. Obviously, there are exceptions to that, like Derrick Henry. But most of the time, you want these younger running backs because you think that, having a guy in their second season like Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, those are better bets. Which is true to an extent. Don't get me wrong. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs were also first round, maybe even beginning of second round picks. So you're not going to have that luxury in rounds 5 or 6 to go make that pick. But what you can do in rounds 5 and 6 is check for guys that have year 5 or more into their career. You want to make sure that you're grabbing guys that have been around the league, that have handled the workload, handled the volume, and can churn out another year of successful football for you. Now, this may sound scary and this may sound frightening to some of you, but notable running backs from the 2021 draft class that are going to be in year 5 next year can be any of these backs. We're looking for Chuba Hubbard, who was drafted in 2021. Obviously, we saw what his season looked like. It kind of depends on how much Jonathan Brooks is going to get in terms of snaps and volume. We don't really know how healthy he's going to be into the season, so if he doesn't start the season healthy, Chuba Hubbard is a guy that could finish in the top 25 realistically. Next player, we're looking for Najee Harris. Now, Najee Harris in year 4 finished in the top 25, but because we know most backs that make it here are year 5 or later, he can now enter that conversation of players that can potentially finish top 25 again. Also, we're looking for, I gotta scroll down for this one now, and it's scary, I get it, but Travis Etienne Jr. was a 2021 running back draft class. So now if he's going to be somebody that's not worth a 3rd round pick, if he's going to be somebody that's drafted in that 4th, 5th, 6th round range, go ahead and take a chance on him if he's available. We know that his season can't possibly be as bad as it was in 2024. And I know if you drafted him, he burned you and you never want to draft him again. But you got to consider it. And another guy, finished outside the top 25. Looked terrible, but you know what? Has a chance to bounce back if he can fend off Audric Estime. That's Javonte Williams, who was also part of this 2021 draft class. He's finally going to have another season removed from injury. So we should start to see the best of him. And with that, we should expect to see good things from Javonte Williams in 2025. Ramondre Stevenson was part of the 2021 running back draft class. Now, a lot of people had high expectations for him this year in 2024. That did not meet the expectations because the New England Patriots were bad, unfortunately. But if the Patriots show any signs of improvement and not being one of the worst teams in the NFL and getting only 4 wins, if this is a 5-win, 6-win team next year, this is a player that can easily crack the top 25 and fit into the analytics of more than half or almost half of the guys finish top 25. And if you don't believe me, let's go back to 2023. In 2023, 12 of the top 25 backs were in year 5 or later. Let's go look at 2022 now. In 2022, 15 of the top 25 running backs were year 5 or later. So now this isn't only exclusive to guys that are in their 5th year. We're looking for older backs that people are diminishing and looking past because they want the new fresh thing. They want the new opportunity. They believe that players' careers are over before they even really finish. They don't want to take a chance on somebody who's quote-unquote older. I mean, even look at this season alone. I get it. Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, all world talents from the 2023 NFL draft class. They get to crack the top 5 just because of how good they both individually are. But that's not always going to happen year over year, where you get 2 amazing running backs in the same draft class hitting top 5 before year 5. Look at the top 5 this year and look at who just missed being a top 5 running back by 0.3 points. Yes, we were 0.3, 0.4 points away from seeing 1, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley, 3 guys hit top 5 in year 5 or later. So the stats prove to be true. These players that are older, that you may think are potentially on their way out, are actually really good draft picks to have in fantasy. This was a reason why I was so high on Derrick Henry this year. Obviously, being in an offense with Lamar Jackson and plenty of RPO ability gave Derrick Henry that amazing Derrick Henry season that some of us thought was going to be happening, and some of us thought maybe he was a little too old to keep it up. But between him and Saquon Barkley absolutely dominating fantasy this year, these are 2 guys that, some people had their doubts on, rightfully so, because they are older running backs and they know how to get it done. They're making the top 5, and that's why you need to be focusing on who's got the experience in the NFL, who's got that ability to just absolutely take over and smash wherever their ADP is. Like right now, it's a little too early to say, this player is a great value, but I can tell you that when you're drafting, keep in mind that top running backs with 5 or more years of experience in the NFL reign supreme in terms of giving you the best output for your ADP draft pick. So again, when you're drafting in 2025, make sure you're looking out for players that have been around the league. Like, for example, I didn't think James Conner would repeat a top season like he had in years past because he didn't finish top 25 last year. James Conner, 5 or more years in the league, finishes as RB11, could have got him in the middle of your drafts, and everyone was sleeping on him. Joe Mixon kind of fits in that same category. Sure, he was a round 4 pick, wasn't really going in like rounds 5, 6, and 7, but another guy, 5 or more years in the league, knows how to get it done and was able to get it done. Aaron Jones, another guy that fits this mold. A lot of people didn't really want him that bad. He was, outside of the top 20 in terms of ADP for running backs. A lot of people were like, are you kidding me? I'd much rather start my draft with Breece Hall than get Aaron Jones. And look where the differences of finishing. Aaron Jones finishes better than him. Obviously, we can't predict that going into the year, but these guys that have 5 or more years in the league produce in fantasy, and that's something to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind, out of all the players that finished in the top 10 this year and last year, only 1 guy carries over, and that's Kyren Williams. So don't be, so high on getting these guys that finish so at the top of your drafts and saying, I need to invest a good pick on them. Now, me personally, I'm going to go ahead and say that there's going to be more than 1 running back next year that finishes in the top 10 from this year's top 10, because I'm looking at Jahmyr Gibbs and I'm looking at Bijan Robinson, and I know at least one of them has to finish top 10 again. I'm looking at Devon Achane, and if I had to bet, I would bet that he's going to finish top 10 again. So year over year, it's going to change, obviously, when rookies come into the league and are absolutely game breakers. Like, these guys were all basically, I don't remember off the top of my head of Achane because he didn't play so many games, but he had so many touchdowns that he probably was flirting with a top 25 finish. These 3 guys are probably going to finish somewhere up here again, or at least around the top 10, maybe even top 12. Those guys and their lack of being in year 5 or later, I'm saying that when you get to those rounds like 4, 5, and 6, when you need a second running back to go with whoever you drafted first, make sure you're grabbing veterans. And that's going to wrap it up for my running back spiel. I know it's still really early into the 2025 year, and we don't know where, of course, ADP, we don't know who's going to get other running backs drafted onto their teams through the NFL draft. We don't know about free agency signings. There's a lot of variables that I can't predict so far, but what I can tell you is that the data doesn't lie. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you felt any of this was useful or informative, please smash that like button for your boy. I would really appreciate that. Helps my videos get out to more and more fantasy football viewers like yourself. It's the off season, but that doesn't mean my videos are going to stop anytime soon. We're going to be rolling out videos all off season long. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of my off season content whatsoever this year. My name is Turtle. This is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video.